Hey everybody, this is Dr. Flight. It's so good to be reaching out to you. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the product market concept and the process for analyzing and better understanding product markets. And in particular, what we're going to look at deals with analyzing customers and analyzing competitors within a product market. Now, this isn't going to be particularly long, and it'll be more of an overview of the idea. The analysis of a product market has five steps that are involved with it. And as part of this, we want to think about understanding and describing the markets that we're trying to serve, and then also the competitive environment that we find ourselves. So this is not really new, and the idea of analyzing your markets and analyzing your competitors is something that you're going to be doing in other areas of marketing anyways. So the concepts here are more of a review and a process, but they're things that you're going to be doing very likely if you're going to segment your marketplace from a generic market to market segments. When you actually go to target specific market segments, you'll do a market analysis anyways. So again, the things that we talk about here in the next couple minutes will most likely be fairly straightforward and intuitive for the most part as we move forward. So let me know if you have any questions. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Fantastic. As we begin here, what we want to do is remember that we have a series of steps in defining and analyzing a product market. The first couple steps include understanding and defining the structure of the market, of the product market, and then analyzing the overall market as a whole, or product market as a whole. The next step then would be to specifically think about the end user and the needs of the end user. So again, this is something that we do throughout the marketing process anyways, but we certainly want to do a fair amount of market research to gather information to describe our markets. And this would be describing market segments at the variant level, most likely. So these would be specific customers and their specific needs, and then characteristics of those. So if you can think of segmentation criteria or descriptive criteria that you would use in analyzing a market segment, this is exactly what we're doing here. So we want to measure things like attitudes, culture, belief systems, demographic data, including family size, age, income, and so forth, a variety of trends in consumption. We can look at loyalty and so forth. We can also, as you are fully aware, measure these types of things in a B2B environment as well. So if your consumer or your buyer, your customer is not an end user, maybe another business, we certainly use a variety of different segmentation criteria and measures to measure them as well. So at the end of the day, this is what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to describe the motivations and the interests of our end user, and we'd probably be using a lot of different descriptive statistics, but then also data that we would use typically to segment the market as well. So one of the models then is to be able to describe our end users. First of all, being able to identify who they are and then describe them, understand the psychographic nature of how and why consumers buy, understand the context and environment in which they buy in, and then ultimately create what we call a customer profile. And then at the end of the day, this is actually kind of an important thing. If you can create a fantastic customer profile, then the customer profile will help lead you into the product development process. So in other words, if you know very clearly how your customer behaves and how they think and what they want and their interest and such, then it becomes fairly easy to then create a product and a value proposition that represents what they need. So if you do a fantastic job creating a customer profile, many of the other things that we do in marketing fall into place rather nicely. Okay, so a customer profile then is written as a narrative that describes a typical customer within your specific product market. You may start with a generic product market description, which would simply be the generic need that the market has. But then, but then as you move from the generic product market down to a specific variant and even to the brand level, you become increasingly more specific in how you describe your customers or the customers that would be satisfied by that subsequent and ultimate brand that you end up with. So there are lots of variations and nuances, if you will, between customers who have different or who are in different categories or who are, again, using products that have different variations associated with them, all the way down to the actual brand, customer brand that's there. Again, using a customer profile helps guide the decision to better understand how the scope and scale of the business should move forward. It helps form product design decisions. It helps form placement and positioning decisions. It helps us understand how to advertise, how to communicate, how to sell, the appeals that we use to motivate consumers to buy. In other words, the customer profile is one of the seminal pieces of the marketing process. If a customer profile is done well, done adequately, with a lot of forethought, then many of the other decisions that we make in marketing all fall into place, and you'll have a lot more success moving forward. The other piece that we do within the middle of this process of understanding the product market is understanding and analyzing competition. At this point then, we want to be able to understand the industry that we're in, and this includes monitoring, evaluating, and being very clear about the scope of the industry in which we compete. We may analyze the industry kind of at a meta level, if you will, thinking about the industry size, growth, and composition, which would include total units sold, total demand for product across all firms, the number of firms that are there, and so forth. We may also consider within the industry what typical benchmarking practices are for executing marketing and so forth. So it may be good, for instance, to know the percentage of revenue that a typical firm spends in advertising, for instance, or what the marketing sales expenses typically are for other firms across the industry, and whether our marketing sales expenses sort of match that benchmark or not. So typical marketing practices are needed to be known within the industry that you're going to compete in, so that you know whether you're going to have a matching competitive type of a value offering at the end of the day. We also want to analyze from an industry perspective anticipated changes. Think about mergers and acquisitions, think about consolidation, or think about the fragmenting of an industry where we have maybe a big company that ultimately gets split up and into smaller companies, and as such their product sales and demand gets split up as well. The opposite is when we have mergers happen within an industry and consolidation, where we have a bunch of small firms that tend to form together a big firm, which concentrates a lot of market share within that large firm, and then they become a kind of a bully or a leader or a heavy influencer to everybody else and others that are moving forward. Other things we think about: industries, strengths and weaknesses, and then strategic alliances among competitors and the relationship that firms have with each other. Strengths in terms of being able to generate new business and new products, maybe the maturity of the industry, maturity of the product category, the category along the product life cycle, for instance, may be another consideration. So analyze the industry first as you move forward, and then we'll start to analyze specific individual competitors. Okay, so number one, when we're analyzing competition, define the competitive arena and define the industry then for generic, specific, and the variant products within the product market. All right, so that's that first step that we just spoke about, and where we're kind of moving as we better understand who we will compete against. We know who the market is and we know what the market wants. Now we need to better understand the product side of the product market equation. Number two, we want to identify and describe who our key competitors are. So we need to literally list our direct competitors, and then also in successive order list competitors who are either indirect or threats as substitutes. So identify and describe key competitors. So much like a customer profile, we actually want to create a competitor profile as well, where we're describing in order our threats from greatest to least and who they are. We want to evaluate these key competitors. So at first we're identifying and describing. Now we want to evaluate them. We want to be able to get a better understanding of how they behave and what we're concerned about. We want to get into maybe the psychographic characteristics of our competitors. So this is an interesting concept where you do an analysis of your competitors and you try to understand their decision-making processes. You look at the decision, kind of the nature of how they make decisions, their structure, organizational structure. You look at their leadership team, where their leaders came from, and so on and so forth. We want to try to forecast, understand, and anticipate competitors' actions. So sometimes we engage in something called game theory, or we do predictive modeling to try to understand how our competitors will react during different pressures that they might be involved in. And then we want to also foresee potential new threats, potential competitors that have not developed or emerged yet, but we anticipate that they will in the future at some point. So these are the things that, like, if we look step by step and we took a progression of action to analyze our competitors, we want to do these things, these 5 pieces that we have in place. When we get back to this identifying, describing our key competitors, we can use illustrations of competitive arenas. In this particular case, we have direct competitors who are identified in the middle. So the product is the Diet Cola kind of variant within a particular product structure. So we have direct competitors who are also diet carbonated beverages here in the middle. And then we have competitors who may not be direct competitors, but also a choice that a consumer could make would be other type of carbonated beverages as opposed to diet carbonated beverages. And then after that, we have other forms of beverages that aren't maybe in the carbonated beverage area, but are beverages nonetheless. But then, interestingly, we have other products that somebody could spend their money on, and instead of buying a diet soda, they spend their money on a video game or an ice cream or something like that. They may be substitutes or other uses of money for for discretionary spending. People don't have to necessarily buy soda, so with that discretionary money, they could buy something else with it, even outside of the beverage arena. So this is another way that we can start ordering and understanding the competitive space within our product market area. This might also be a remnant of the structure that you created when you're creating and analyzing the structure of a product market as well. So those direct competitors would be the competitors who compete with you within a specific variant of a category. The ones that lie further outside the ring here would be ones that are further up towards the generic side or generic end of the product domain. Okay, so again, another tool, managerial tool that you can use moving forward. So specifically, what are we looking for when we're looking to analyze key competitors? So you say, well, we want to evaluate them. After we identify who our competitors are, we want to evaluate them. Well, what are we looking for when we're evaluating them? We're looking for things like their scope and their objectives and what they want to accomplish. We're looking for managerial experience, capabilities, and weaknesses. So again, the psychographic elements of maybe the leadership team within our competitors. Their market position. So for instance, is the competitor, or do they have a big market share? Do they tend to be a leader? Their market segments and their customer base. So if I have a competitor, I want to know who their customers are and who they are trying to serve. I want to understand their marketing program, their positioning strategies. I want to understand my competitors' financial positions, their ability on a technical basis, their operations, like how they produce their product, what processes they use, things like that. Other things I want to know are what they do well and where their competitive resources lie, what patents they might have. I want to know who their suppliers are, what relationships they have with retailers, and so on and so forth. So there are many things, there are lots of things that we want to know about when we're analyzing our competitors, and these all may form together to form a competitive profile. Just like you created a market segment profile for their customers, you might create a profile that examines in great detail your competitors. So this competitor analysis is somewhat important. You find this information out through lots of different methods. There are agencies and companies that engage in corporate learning and knowledge. So you want to find out as much as you can through public reports, newspapers, public disclosures, patent filings, for instance, promotional materials, press releases, advertising that your competitors do help you learn some of this material. You can get information from their current employees and customers. Also, recently fired employees are a good source of information about your competitors. So go find people who worked for your competitor, and then see if you can't find out information about how they operate and such. So we can do some surveying like that. We can also go to trade shows. We can look and see their advertising for new jobs and employment ads, take plant tours, something reverse engineering we sometimes do, new hire announcements, and so forth. And there's actually a whole list of these types of things that can be done. There are lots of ways that we can investigate our competition, lots of sources for this type of research and this type of data collection. Okay, so what we did here, just to review, is we looked at two elements that are within the analysis of product market space. We looked at analyzing the market and market segments, and we looked at analyzing our competition. Now, again, I iterated earlier on that these are processes that are done throughout marketing, throughout the planning process at a lot of different stages. Most likely you're doing a lot of this during targeting and positioning anyways, but it also serves as a basis for analyzing product markets from an early planning stage as well. Again, the more of this that's done, the better the results are going to be moving forward in terms of your planning process, and then also the execution of your actual marketing programs. Okay, so anyways, let me know if you have any questions. Again, this is a discussion that is part of the concept of product market space. Product market space is actually a big concept that a lot of people use, so there are lots of nuances to it, and again, a tool that the marketer will find handy as they plan and execute their marketing their marketing plans. So all right, thanks. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.